Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Well, Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Welcome to week number 4, recorded lecture number 11. Well, in this recorded lecture, we will continue with effective oral presentations that we started in the last lecture. And in the last lecture, we covered purpose and audience. We discussed in detail the purpose of presentation, and then we talked about importance of audience in oral presentation, and we also discussed different types of audience. Now today we shall move towards organization of the information. So, as discussed in the last recorded lecture, that content or ideas of your presentation are the most important thing that you must focus on. Obviously, as I have said earlier as well, that on that particular topic that you have been assigned, you should at least be minimum, your preparation level should be better than the best knowing person in your audience on that topic. So that means you need to put in a lot of effort to first stage to gather the information, right? To explore more about the topic. And second, it's not only having a lot of information. Effective presentations focus on organization of the content. Well, if your presentation is not organized, that is less likely to achieve the target goals. So, how to organize a presentation? Usually, these formal oral presentations are organized this way. Well, they begin with introduction, right? When we talk about introduction of your presentation, the first thing it does, it serves the first purpose the introduction serves is it should capture audience attention, and it should also it should also it should capture audience attention, and it should also involve audience in that presentation. Well, there are multiple ways to capture audience attention and to involve them, but we shall be discussing only few of them. So one way to capture audience attention and involve them is to ask them a question, right? You can begin your presentation by asking a question to your audience. But please remember, these questions are actually rhetorical questions. The question should be that which necessarily may not require answer from the audience. And even if you are planning to think of a question that requires audience response, then the response should be subjective. For example, You can ask opinion based questions, you know, where there is nothing right and nothing wrong. Secondly, when you ask a question, please do not force audience to answer your question. Like, do not point people that, okay, Mr. or Ms., you, maybe the person, the member in the audience does not know the answer, and he or she may feel insulted. So you can begin your presentation with a question, but please remember that question can be a rhetorical question. That question can be an open question that requires opinion of your respondents, and you do not force your audience to answer that question. Those who are willing to participate, they can, and always there are a good number of people who are willing to involve in your presentation. So even if you get 2 3 4 responses, they are enough, and usually uh, you may not have uh, that much time that you can take everyone's response. Now, second strategy to capture audience attention and involve them is telling them a startling fact, right? But please remember, that should be a fact, that should not be a lie, that should not be a made fact. For example, I can recall once I had my audience. I did not know much about my audience. I was just informed to have a session on nonverbals for teachers, and those teachers, uh, they belong to a particular organization that was very strict, and very traditional sort of teachers. Now when I reached for the session, and they were all mature people, I won't say elderly, but most of them were above 40 or 45. And it's, at that time I was comparatively younger than them. So when I asked them the question, well, what do you think, what is importance of nonverbal in our daily life? So they just started making fun. Somebody would say it's not important. Others would say, well, because they were very traditional sort of teachers, they would say, well, only stick works in class, non-verbal is not effective, so on and so forth. But then, luckily, I had a research finding with me which said that almost 80% of our everyday communication is non-verbal communication. So when I shared this fact with them, they became serious and they got involved in my session that also had a presentation. You can also begin with a joke, but remember that joke should be relevant, rather must be relevant, and it should not be biased. It should not target a linguistic group like Pathan or Sardars or Baloch, or it should not be targeting any linguistic group, right? It should not be gender biased, that targeting women or usually women. So it should not be a biased joke. It should be relevant. And if you think you can handle your audience after you share a joke, and if they burst into a laughter, if you are an experienced presenter, you may be able to bring them back to the normal. But if you think that things will go out of your control, then I would recommend you shouldn't go for a joke. You can also capture their attention by sharing them a story. Story doesn't mean a 3 hour long story, a small personal story or anecdote. Or you can also begin with a quotation of some expert in the relevant field on which you present, right? Now, second point in introduction of an organization, or sorry, of a presentation should be identify yourself and establish your credibility. How do we do so? Describe your position, knowledge or experience, whatever qualifies you to speak. You know, in most of the cases, usually the first slide, or sometimes maybe the second, that has the presenter's name and title, if somebody is a doctor or engineer or something like that, professional title, and maybe position, job position, right? Well, for example, if you want to give a presentation on engineering related topic and your professional title is engineer, audience is more likely to pay more attention because they know that the field relevant person is going to speak. Or if you do not have that professional degree, at least you can mention your position, that for example you have been working as environmental engineer or as an in environmental field for last 10 years. So this, your experience, position, your profession, your professional titles, they actually help you establish your credibility among the audience. And third very important point is preview main points of your presentation, right? In the introduction part, because if your presentation is say for 15 to 20 minutes, it should not have a lot of points, right? Suppose if that is up to 10 minutes presentation, maybe you can have 3 to 4 points, and you, in introduction preferably, you should okay. After introduction, the second most important uh, part in organizing a presentation is body of the presentation. First was introduction of the presentation, second is body of the presentation. That covers most part of your presentation. Now, first thing, when it comes to body of a presentation, so focus on the main points previewed in introduction. Of course, if you have already organized a presentation and you have already previewed the points in your introduction, that you would be talking about these 3 or 4 points, then the body should mainly focus only on the previewed points in introduction. There can be slight change because when you start delivering presentation, you might have a relevant example at that time, but you should not deviate. There should not be a major deviation in the points that you previewed in introduction and the points that you cover in body of your presentation. So your focus of the body must remain on the points that were previewed in introduction of that presentation. Well, next, develop each main point with adequate but not excessive explanation and details, right? Like each point, the points that you previewed in introduction, now you take those points one by one, and then you adequately explain that point, or you adequately inform the audience about that point, or you adequately convince your audience for that point. Remember, this main point explanation or information or persuasion should neither be too long nor it should be too short. So it should adequately be covered so that it provides the audience the relevant information or explanation or uh, persuasion. At the same time, it is not unnecessarily lengthy that it becomes too boring for your audience. So do not unnecessarily drag the point, but give reasonable time to that point. Well, these main ideas that you cover in body of a presentation, they can be organized according to, this is further organization of the main point. They can be organized according to time, that you may begin with the earlier time first, then the time after that, and then you move forward in chronology, right? So they can be organized according to time. They can also be organized according to component, according to importance, that the most important one comes first, then the second most important, and this is how you move forward. There can be some criteria. You can make their conventional grouping, like problem and solution, or you can also go for pro and con alternatives. So these are some of the suggested ways how you can cover your main points in body of your presentation. Now we shall have a further look on them as we move forward. We will see each one of them, like examples for these organizations that we have just talked about. Like time, the first is time, a presentation describing the history of a problem organized chronologically from the first sign of trouble to the present. As he said, well, if nature of your presentation is such which talks about history or time, suppose if you want to discuss uh, progress that Pakistan has made in last 70 years, then you may divide these 70 years into 3 to 4 phases. You know, the first 10 years, then second 10 years, then third 10 years, you know. So first decade you share the performance, and second decade, so on and so forth. So this would be chronology, that you are covering important points of related to Pakistan, and you have maintained a chronology, and you are moving forward in a sequence, like you take 1947 to 1957, that can be one bracket, then 57 to 67, then you may take 67 and onwards, or you can use any other chronology also, right? But in time usually you maintain the sequence. Well, second, it is component. Well, if you are writing a sales report and you organized it geographically by regions or topically by products. If you are making a sales report and your presentation is about sales report, so your organization of the information can either be according to geography. For example, if it is a multinational and discussing Asian countries, then you can keep a sequence, say Pakistan is one country, Bangladesh is second one, India is third one, right? So this is geographically you divide, organize in region, or topically according to topic. You can do, if your company makes 5 products, then you can begin with product A, then product B, then product C, so on and so forth. You can also go for importance. If your presentation discusses, or nature of your presentation is such that you want to cover certain points according to their importance, then a report describing operating problems arranged from the most important to the least important. So if you want to cover important points of a certain topic in your presentation, then preferably you should begin with the most important, and then you can go to the least important. However, in rare cases it may be other way around, but that's rare. That's not a common practice, that sometimes people may begin with the worst case, then move towards the best. But the more frequent one and the more feasible one that usually experts suggest, that is you begin with the most important points, and then your last point is the least important point. Well, criteria, there can be, your presentation can also be organized according to criteria. So, a presentation evaluating equipment by comparing each model against a set of specification. If you are comparing, say, two products and their models, then you should have some criteria, that on what criteria are you making the comparison. So those, if there are 5 headers in criteria, for example, the first header, if you are comparing two mobile phones, and the first criterion is the function, so function is one criteria. Second criterion is, say, memory. Third criterion is, say, its camera. Fourth is like its RAM, so on and so forth. So if your presentation covers topics that are based on different criteria, then you should organize your presentation according to each criterion. So you take one criterion and then you cover it, you go for the next criterion, so on and so forth. This is how you move forward. Well, body of your presentation can also be organized according to conventional groupings, right? So a report comparing assets size, fees charged, and yields of mutual funds arranged by these existing categories. If you are working for an organization and there are already some fixed, ready-made, arranged categories, then body of your presentation should cover those categories, and you can place those presentations according to that category, right? For example, if you are going for an engineering project, and in your engineering project, if conventional groupings are, for example, findings of the report and testing of something, say, for example, a soil test or any other test that is related to your field. So if the topic has some conventional groupings where people are expecting that you would be covering them in that way, then you should be covering them that way. Or that grouping can be sequenced. For example, in your project, the first heading can be introduction of your project, second heading can be the current literature on your project, third heading can be the methodology that you use for your project. So these are conventional groupings. In case of a project, you might be using that for your final year project report. Well, you can also divide body of your presentation according to problem and solution. So a presentation describing excessive company travel expenses and 3 possible solutions. So you take a problem and then you provide its solution. You take the second problem, you provide second solution. So this is how you can organize, but again, of course, it will depend that the nature of the topic that you are going to present on has this problem solution nature. Of course, it cannot be applied to all topics. Then pro and con alternatives, that there are some pros for something and there are some cons for something, right? So you can organize body in this way, that first you can discuss all pros, then you can discuss all cons, like a presentation outlining the advantages and disadvantages regarding whether an organization should invest only in the stocks of environmentally friendly companies. For example, the company is deciding on whether they should invest, suppose, only in banking sector in stock exchange. Now, discussing advantages of investing only in banking sector and discussing only disadvantages of investing only in banking sector. I have taken banking sector only as an example. It can be any other sector, right? But this sort of presentation where advantages or disadvantages of something are to be covered, then you can organize your presentation according to advantages and disadvantages of that topic. Well, the third and to me the most important part. Well, there are a few things that we must keep in mind. Usually, novice presenters are very energetic in the beginning. Their introduction goes very well, right? With the passage of time, because body is the lengthiest part of your presentation, then when they spend some more time on covering main points in body of the presentation, they get little exhausted, and many of the novice presenters, they leave podium without even concluding the presentation, right? Please remember, conclusion is as important as your introduction, because your audience will always remember how you concluded your presentation. And while going for conclusion, if you are in a rush and if you leave your conclusion in the middle, or if you do not properly wind up your presentation, despite you may have made a lot of effort in introduction and in body of your presentation, but if you did not conclude it well, it will not bring you the desired results, because audience is going to take it this way, that you left somewhere in the middle and you did not reach the conclusion, and audience will start making their own interpretations. So please do focus on conclusion of your presentations. Conclusion is as important as introduction and, as a matter of fact, body. Well, what to do in conclusion? Well, the first thing in conclusion you must do, you must summarize the main themes of the presentation. Those main points that you previewed in introduction of your presentation, then you discussed them in detail in body of your presentation. Now in conclusion of your presentation, you summarize those main themes. So this is first and most important thing of your conclusion. Secondly, include a statement that allows you to leave the podium gracefully. Like, announce conclusion. Do not conclude your presentation abruptly. How do we announce conclusion? Like, we can use few transitional cues. Usually effective presenters may conclude as saying, okay, well, the last point for today is, or they may say, well, to sum up, let me say, or they may say, well, to conclude with. Now these are indicators that you are going towards your conclusion, right? And once you have announced conclusion by using words like, well, to sum up, well, to conclude, well, to wind up, once you have used these points, please do not start a new point. Sometimes some presenters, usually novice presenters, in conclusion they start a new point. That is not expected, right? Conclusion actually is you are going to cover what you have already said. Now if you start a new point, when are you going to explain that point or inform your audience, so your audience you know will not get complete details or will not get satisfactory discussion on that point. So please, in conclusion, do not start anything new, right? For example, as we said, while covering body of your presentation, there might be a few changes. Maybe they are slightly different from what you announced in introduction, right? Again, that should not be a major difference. But in conclusion, please do not include anything new. And once you announce the podium, sorry, you announce the conclusion, like to wind up, to end, to summarize, well, as a last thing, then do not start anything new, because audience will not be willing to listen to you once you have already announced the conclusion. Okay, so well, thank you very much. Today we have covered how to organize our oral presentation, and the oral presentation topic is not over yet. So we will have the last recorded lecture where we will cover remaining part of oral presentation, and the next lecture will inshallah conclude this topic. So please do take good care, and thank you very much once again.